First of all, I want to clarify, I did not contribute anything to that clip at all. I did not work on that clip. That clip was produced by Blizzard Entertainment, which is one of the most highly regarded and best known computer game companies in the world. They produce outstanding pre-rendered video sequences. So that was actually a teaser trailer that came out about 12 months before the game did. And that's a teaser trailer for a game that they produced called StarCraft 2. Now, that is also an edited version of the clip. There is a little bit that happens after that screen goes to black. There is some more information that happens, and there's a little bit that happens beforehand. I purposely edited both the front and the end of that because the thing I liked about the elements of the clip that I illustrated is that you can almost barely see what's going on. You see a hand, and you can kind of vaguely tell that there might be a person in amongst all of that. But it is actually a fairly ambiguous clip. There's a lot of machinery going on, and you get the impression that something's being assembled, but the ambiguity of it is something that I quite like. And the hand is about the only giveaway that there's actually being a person encased in that suit. You also get the kind of impression that they're not necessarily supposed to be coming out of the suit once they're put into it. So from a point of view of the visuals of that clip, there's a lot going on, but there's sort of like, well, what is going on? I can kind of see some things, and there's lots of machinery, and it's obviously science fiction-y because there's all sorts of tech there that we don't have. But from my point of view, the sound is doing an astounding job in that of illustrating all sorts of things. There's obviously the general level of technology, big machinery. It's supposed to be, I guess, in some ways, possibly overwhelming. I mean, obviously depending on the volume that you play it at, but it's quite an active, noisy soundscape. But you're also getting lots of different levels that are going on with the sound. You've got levels from very, very core, basic, big, grindy, thumping machines. Now, for something that's supposed to be high tech, having machinery that kind of looks like it's come out of, maybe World War II era production lines has a level of primitiveness to it that is kind of ominous in itself. This thing is part of, and it is in fact, that is basically a space marine being bolted into a suit of armor, and he's supposed to go off and fight. So there's this whole sort of like, this is a military type production line, and we've got this big, powerful machinery going on. And yet at the same time, there's all these subtle sounds that are going on. And in fact, a lot of you quite possibly missed it. And this is not a criticism at all. It's just that being played something for the first time, quite often you're like, what am I looking at? What am I consuming? The other thing is that you're being shown something for the first time that had visuals. So I would actually argue that most of you were probably paying 80 to 90% of your attention towards the visuals, not towards the audio. Now, if I'd actually thought about this, I would have actually had the clip queued up again to play the entire thing with just the audio. I won't. You can find that yourselves and have a listen to it later on. But there are all sorts of things going on where, as the different armor plates are being added onto his body, there are lots of high frequency sounds of little squeaks and whistles and clicks and stuff like that. Now, one of the reasons why the high frequency sounds are very important is because high frequencies have a very, very good ability to cut through. This is why we make alarms, mobile phone rings and things like that as high frequencies. Because of the nature of the sound, they're fairly shrill to our hearing, and ask a dog, dogs don't like them at all. So high frequency sounds will cut through. So we can, even though there's this giant thumping bass machinery and of course the thumping bass music, we're not missing out on these other things. And it's not so much that they're louder, it's that within the frequency spectrum, certain sounds will be heard and will stand out. This is just as an aside, this is actually what music producers talk about when they're talking about getting a good mix. And in fact, one of the tragedies to me of life and people listening to music are all the people sitting in their hotted up cars with their subwoofers going doof, 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 and they're missing about 90% of the music that's being produced. And in fact, they're missing the doof, 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 because the wavelengths of those frequencies, the best place to be when somebody's got a car with a giant subwoofer is about 4 meters behind the car. Because the wavelengths of those frequencies are that long that the sweet spot, they need to be sitting in a trailer behind the car. So they're spending hundreds and thousands of dollars on speaker systems where the person in the car behind them is actually appreciating it more than they are. But this is the thing where a good mix is having a good mix for, and this is actually a very good audio mix, is why I use an example, and a good mix in either a film or a television or even just music is where you've got a mixture of low instruments, medium instruments, and high instruments because they combine together to give you a fuller spectrum as far as the sound spectrum is concerned. The visual equivalent would be looking at a movie or something like that where they decided, oh yeah, we don't need red. We'll remove red from the movie that you're watching. And you'd be like, well, that just doesn't look right. And it's the same sort of thing with sound. So in this particular case, there's one particular bit in this where down his spine, there's all these clips that all just go click, 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 and they've all got a little hiss and a click. And these have far more of a feeling of high-tech sort of machinery because we're used to very like little sort of servos or something like that that have a little sort of squeak or a whiz sort of sound. And so this particular clip has the energy and almost the primal fear behind it of these giant low-frequency machines, but at the same time, the high-tech whizzes and squeaks of small servos and circuitry and stuff like that. And then combined in with that are things like when the pneumatic cables get pulled out and you get this sort of loud hiss, etc., which again has almost got a predatory sound because we sort of maybe associate it with either something along the lines of a snake or high-pressure steam. Again, dangerous. So all of this particular scene, even though we're not even sure what we're looking at, the sounds, and just the sounds, are conveying an awful lot of information about what's going on here from a narrative point of view. The music, as I mentioned in the clip, low thumping bass. And this is very much kind of a what's going on, this is serious sort of stuff. And then there's basically a tiny little snippet of dialogue that again gives you a huge amount of information. All Marines prepare to drop. Okay, Marines, military, prepare to drop. Okay, okay, that's either parachutes or some sort of science fiction thing. They're just going to bundle them out or whatever. Okay, this is obviously a situation where all Marines prepare to drop. This tells us from a narrative point of view that not only is this guy being encased in his suit right now, he's probably going into combat right now. One sentence. Now, there was actually another clip that I was originally going to include in this, but I didn't want to push my my chances with copyright so much. In a presentation, I actually teach sound design at RMIT, and in my first lecture for each subject, I show off various different things talking about narration and how effective sound, music, and dialogue are. And in fact, one of the things that I say about dialogue is that one word is all it takes to actually impart emotional responses in the right audience. Now, being a huge geek, the sorts of things that I will demonstrate in those sorts of lectures are usually games, science fiction type films, etc. And I put together a montage out of a particular franchise, a film franchise that's been going now for quite some years, of scenes in nearly every single one of these movies that have ever been produced of one word being used. And in this particular series, it's a science fiction series. Generally, what usually happens, as with a lot of the sorts of things that we're used to from a narrative point of view, our heroes have spent most of the film having the snot beaten out of them, and it's kind of like, okay, everything's going badly, and then there's the payback time when the heroes finally turn around and go, okay, we've had enough, it's our turn now. And the particular franchise I'm talking about is the Star Trek film franchise. And pretty much every single film in the Star Trek film franchise has the word fire in it. And it's quite interesting because it's actually something that does not get used in a lot of other film franchises, science fiction or whatever. But in Star Trek, there's just that point in just about every single film where whoever the hero is or the boss is or whatever looks straight down the camera and just says one word, and then all hell breaks loose. And it's usually all hell breaking loose for the bad guys. And in fact, the latest one that was released in 2009 actually has a quite an interesting counterpoint to that, where there's a scene just before the good guys come along, and the bad guys are about to be rammed by one of the good guys in a sacrificing way that's going to sort of make their life very, very horrible. And the bad guy captain, in a fit of panic, just goes, "Fire everything!" And it was quite interesting that in that film, they don't actually have the good guys saying fire. They have the bad guys basically saying it, but in a panicked voice and in an overreaction, because all the good guys are they're always very, very cold and clinical about it. It's just one word, and it's usually said with a lot of determination, and it's just fire. because it's kind of like, okay, now you've annoyed us. Now it's time for payback. Whereas when the bad guy does it, it's like, oh, you know, he has to sort of do it in a blind panic. So, but it's just an interesting observation of how a single word, and this is the thing, if you're a Star Trek fan, or even just a movie fan, or even just somebody who allows themselves to go to a film and relax and actually enjoy it. If you want to criticize the film or analyze the film, do it afterwards. When you're actually going to go and watch the film, allow yourself to enjoy it. Allow yourself to live the experience for that hour and a half or 2 hours. If that means you're going to cry, or you're going to laugh, or you're going to cheer, you're going to enjoy the film so much more if you allow yourself to do that. If you let down your guard, stop being a teacher, stop being a critic, stop being a creator and a producer for an hour and a half, and allow yourself to be a fanboy or a fangirl, to the point where the good guys do start to win, you're like, yeah. And this is the whole point. And that single word, too right I do. I'm like, oh goody, now the bad guys are going to get it. Because I'm traditional in that way. I never grew up. I watch a movie, I want to see the bad guys get their butts kicked at the end. That's why I go to watch movies. I don't want the bad guys to win. That's what happens in real life. All right.